On a freezing afternoon in 1919, Boston's North End looked completely ordinary until the impossible happened. Without warning, a massive wall of dark, sticky molasses came tearing through the street like a living monster. People ran in terror, horses panicked, wagons flipped into the air. It wasn't water, it wasn't mud, it was molasses, and it was deadly. Just moments before disaster, life in Boston's North End felt normal. Workers crossed the cold streets, children walked along the cobblestones, and horse-drawn wagons rolled past brick buildings under a gray winter sky. It was an ordinary day in a hard-working immigrant neighborhood. No one knew that in only a few moments, everything would change forever. Towering over the neighborhood stood a giant steel tank, 50 feet tall, nearly 90 feet wide, and filled with more than 2 million gallons of molasses. To most residents, it had become part of the landscape. Children passed beneath it, families lived beside it, workers ignored it every day. But looming above the street like a silent giant, it was a disaster waiting to happen. The tank leaked so often that neighborhood children treated it like a strange gift. They would hold out cups and tin cans, collecting the dark syrup dripping from the steel seams. To them, it felt sweet, almost magical. But what looked harmless in their hands was actually a warning sign. The giant tank above them was already failing. At night, the tank felt even more unsettling. Residents said they could hear the steel groaning in the cold, a deep metallic creak that echoed through the winter air. Molasses glistened down its sides under lantern light. People watched from their windows, uneasy but powerless. The neighborhood was sleeping beside a ticking time bomb made of steel and syrup. Then came the fresh shipment. Workers pumped even more molasses into the giant tank, forcing dark syrup into a structure that was already under pressure. Steam rose in the winter air as laborers carried on with routine industrial work. But with every gallon added, the danger grew heavier. The tank was filling, and so was the risk. January 15th, 1919. A cold but calm winter afternoon. Workers moved through the streets, children lingered nearby, and horse wagons passed as if it were just another ordinary day in Boston. In the background, the giant tank stood silent and still. No one knew these were the last normal moments before one of America's strangest disasters began. Then, at around 12:40 in the afternoon, the city heard a sound it would never forget. A violent, metallic roar split the air as the steel tank tore itself apart. Rivets blasted outward, metal seams burst open, and in a single terrifying instant, millions of gallons of molasses exploded into the street. The tank had finally given way. The first wave hit like an explosion. A towering surge of hot, dark molasses slammed into the North End, smashing wooden carts, hurling debris, and knocking people off their feet. Horses collapsed in terror. Buildings shook from the force. What looked absurd from a distance was, in that moment, pure destruction. Boston was being crushed by a wave of syrup. And then came the second horror. The molasses thickened fast. Men, women, and children found themselves trapped, knee-deep, waist-deep, unable to run, unable to breathe, unable to pull themselves free. Every movement became a fight against something heavy, sticky, and merciless. In just seconds, the street had turned into a deadly trap. The horses had almost no chance. Still trapped in their harnesses, they panicked and thrashed as the thick molasses pulled them down. Drivers fought desperately to cut them free, but the wreckage and sticky flood made every second impossible. In 1919, horses were part of daily life in Boston, and on that day, many died exactly where they stood. The force of the wave did more than trap people. It tore the neighborhood apart. Wooden structures splintered, windows exploded, beams snapped and crashed into the street. Part of the area's buildings gave way under the impact. What had begun as a flood was now a full-scale urban disaster.
As screams filled the streets, people ran toward the chaos. Police officers, firefighters, dock workers, and ordinary neighbors rushed in without hesitation. At first, many thought a bomb had exploded, but what they found was something even stranger, an entire neighborhood buried in sticky brown destruction. Soon, U.S. Navy sailors joined the rescue effort. They waded into the thick molasses using ropes and wooden planks, trying to reach people trapped beneath debris and syrup. Every rescue was slow, every step was dangerous. The flood had become a battlefield, and time was running out. Amid the wreckage, some searched for the people they loved. A mother called out for her missing child, her voice swallowed by the chaos around her. The streets were covered in syrup, splintered wood, and shattered lives. In moments like these, the disaster stopped being bizarre and became heartbreak. When night fell, the rescue did not stop. Lanterns glowed through the fog as police, sailors, and neighbors kept searching in the freezing dark. The cold air made the molasses even thicker, turning the streets into a hardening trap. With every passing hour, hope became harder to hold on to. By the next day, the full horror was impossible to ignore. The streets were coated in thick brown syrup. Wagons were shattered, steel was twisted, buildings were damaged. Rescuers and survivors stood in stunned silence, surrounded by a neighborhood transformed into a sticky graveyard. What sounded unbelievable in headlines had become a real and devastating tragedy. Then came the cleanup. Workers blasted the streets with hoses, shoveled through syrup-covered wreckage, and scraped molasses from walls, rails, and cobblestones. Salt water was brought in to help wash the city clean, but molasses does not leave easily. For days, Boston struggled to remove the sticky remains of the disaster. After the shock came the questions. How could a giant industrial tank burst in the middle of a crowded neighborhood? Families took the company to court, and the legal battle revealed a chilling truth. Warnings had been ignored, safety had failed, and negligence had cost lives. The disaster was not just strange, it was preventable. Today, the streets of Boston are quiet again, but the memory of that impossible day still lingers in history. The Great Molasses Flood remains one of America's strangest disasters, not because it was absurd, but because it was real. A wall of sugar took lives, shattered families, and left behind a warning that still matters today. When safety is ignored, history can turn deadly in the most unimaginable ways.